Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Supply Chain. So, before we start, let's get you thinking with a question. Today's guest marked its third busiest year ever in 2024, behind only the pandemic driven annual totals of 2021 and 2022. So, how many TEUs did they handle? What do you think? Well, let me know your guesses over on social and keep listening because I'll let you know at the end of the show. So today I'm joined by a location that in 2024 moved approximately $246 billion worth of goods. They've claimed an impressive 35% of the North America East Coast market share. But who are they? Well, it's the Port of New York and New Jersey. So, the Port of New York and New Jersey is the gateway to one of the most concentrated consumer markets in North America and the largest port on the East Coast. 100 years after its creation, the port continues to thrive with innovation, sustainable best practices, and a strong competitive edge. And it's Stephanie Dominguez, Assistant Director of Commercial Development for the Port Department at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, that is joining me for the show today. Since joining the Port Authority in 2019, Stephanie has been instrumental in a number of major initiatives and now leads teams responsible for overseeing trade development strategies, maritime relations, customer outreach, and port efficiency. And today, Stephanie and I will be talking all about the Port of New York and New Jersey. We'll be exploring the big challenges and the infrastructure projects in development to tackle them. We'll be talking about the importance of collaboration and industry-wide sustainability progress. And given the current geopolitical landscape, we'll be reflecting on exactly what the rest of 2025 is going to look like for the Port of New York and New Jersey. So, welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me here. I'm so excited to be here, get a chance to talk about the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So thank you for inviting us.
Yes, I am so happy to have you here. I'm not sure we've had a whole port represented on the show before. So that's
Yeah.
really exciting because we have the opportunity to get into some of the biggest topics and to talk about the industry as a whole, where we really are with big issues like collaboration and sustainability. And so I am looking forward to this conversation. But before we dive in, can you give us a bit of an introduction to the Port of New York and New Jersey? Who are you? What do you do? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk about port. So the Port of New York and New Jersey is comprised of five marine terminal operators, three auto processors, one passenger terminal, and break bulk. So that's juice, edible oils, cement, and roll salt. So here in the Northeast, everyone knows roll salt is very important and essential. So those are a couple things that we manage here at the Port of New York and New Jersey. And we have a long history. A little fun fact that containerization started actually at our port in 1956. Yes,
What?
and not a lot of people know that, but maritime's been going on longer than that. But the containerization came from the Port of New York and New Jersey.
That's amazing. I had no idea. And everybody loves a fun fact. So I'm glad you brought a fun fact to the table.
Anytime.
So let's talk about why organizations should choose your port, right? What is it that gives you a competitive edge? And how, in turn, does that give companies doing business with you their own competitive advantage? Because, like, that's what everybody's looking for, right? Top of mind
Yeah.
for all retailers and organizations that would work with you.
Yeah, so I should mention that I work with a very experienced expertise team that manages many different facets. And so I'm going to go through them because it actually helps our competitive edge. So under the commercial umbrella, we manage the lease, the properties, optimize cargo through efficiency tools and conversation collaboration. And so there's a lot of outreach as well that we participate. But when it comes to the Port of New York and New Jersey, we're actually a part of a larger system, which is the Port Authority of New York and in New Jersey. And we have a model here, which is We are world-class operators of world-class facilities. And so what that translates to the Port of New York and New Jersey is we're the world-class gateway port. So we're really focused on efficiency and reliability when it comes to delivering services to the local, national, and international markets. So we want people to know that we care, we've been prepared, we're committed to be prepared and invest into our futures. So just to take a little closer look of what today is. So today we have 45 weekly ocean carrier services and we're the first port of call on 75% of them. 75%.
Wow. That's a big
Yeah,
number.
we're killing it. And then, as I mentioned earlier on with our MTOs, they are our partners. You know, even though they're competitors to each other, together, collectively, they just do it. You know, we're a landlord port, so you know, having those relationships is key. And you know, using what we have, we are also very land constrained in New York and
Mhm.
New Jersey. So you can imagine using every space available to be efficient is top of mind for everybody. So we have about 30,000 feet or so about berth dedicated just for container business. So 30,000. That's not much when you think about the volumes, which I won't give it away because I know there's a little context going on. But of the volume of TEUs that comes through our port. So efficiency is like within our blood.
Well, and
And so,
I think that is sort of the mantra of New York City as well, right? New York City,
yeah.
New Jersey is like you use every square inch that is available to you.
Literally, we cannot go anything to waste. And talking about that, so access. So, you know, we have our ocean capabilities, we have our terminals who are constantly investing and being efficient when it comes to operations. Then we have access.
Mm.
So we have within a 4 hour radius access to 46 million consumers just
Wow.
within a 4 hour drive. So like think about that. That's huge. So you're sitting, you're driving, and it would not be possible if it weren't for our hardworking trucking community. We are, you know, very grateful to have a very vocal and very collaborative trucking community. And so just on that one day, we usually have anywhere between like 9 to 9.5 thousand daily callers of the truckers coming through
Wow.
our ports. Yes.
Wow. So if
It's
anybody's looking for lessons on efficiency, they should come to your port.
They should definitely come to our port, but we're also looking for best practices. We have a team that, you know, there's always continuous improvement, always.
Mhm.
And so we're not always, you know, we're not saying we're the best, but we strive for the world-class best and it's important and it's done with our stakeholders, but that's what gives us that extra edge, right?
Yeah. Well,
Then,
and you mentioned the word relationship earlier on as well. And I
yeah,
think, this industry is built on relationships in a variety of different ways, but also supply chains are built on relationships as well.
mm,
Because there's so many people, there's so many organizations, there's so many moving parts to supply chain that they all have to work in conjunction with each other. And that takes a lot of relationships and people working together.
yeah, absolutely. It's relationship, it's trust, communication, collaboration. And it's fundamentally our bedrock. You know, rail, another key
Right.
for us. We have four on-dock, near-dock express rail facilities that serve all key inland markets, and we work with our two Class 1 railroads, CSX and Norfolk Southern. I know I mentioned we hit 46 million within 4 hours. The rail actually gives us an additional 89 million in consumer reach.
Wow.
So yes, we're killing it. Like I said.
Well, and you've done the research, right? You
Yeah.
know what it looks like outside well, I can't say four walls because you don't really
Yeah.
have walls, but
We
you know
don't.
what I mean, right? You know what it
Yeah.
looks like. You know what it means for your customers to work with you at the ports, to move goods through your ports. And that that builds that trust that you were talking about. And I love to hear that. Now, over the last few years, the Port of New York and New Jersey and the industry as a whole has really faced a lot of challenges, right? The pandemic increased volumes in 2021, 2022. We sadly saw the bridge collapse in Baltimore last year in 2024. Where are you now? Like, what do the current challenges look like on a macro level, and how do they translate to the micro level for you?
Yeah, so the macro challenges, like the geopolitical ones that you're mentioning, are not unique to just the Port of New York and New Jersey. They're throughout. So there's true emphasis and like communication through stakeholders. We're very resilient. When I joined over, I was immersed in a situation that, we had unfortunately, an event. Then, like you said, we had the pandemic, and we have all these events, but it's really nice, even through competitors, we just work together,
Mm,
because we know that there's a greater purpose and to really service the market, whether it's a local, national, or even region, we know that, we're impacting lives on a daily basis. So it's the groceries that you're shopping for, it's the gasoline that you're filling your cars with, the clothing that's on our backs. Everything that you can think of has a connection and
mhm,
it's a domino effect. So resiliency, collaboration, communication is key. And this industry, I know it sounds very cheesy, but it really is like this tight-knit, community that even if you're new to it, if you need help, people will work with you.
mhm.
And so that's really important for relationships to help one another, both on a macro and a micro level.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they come together in times of disruption. I was just talking to somebody on my show the other day about how they don't have all the answers around some of the big T word, which I won't mention. And they're looking for help within the community to be able to find those answers or at least come together to find answers to some of the questions that they have about moving goods. But really, at the end of the day, you're able to see the impact on the
Yeah.
ground. Like that
Yeah.
is the true magic of a port, right?
Yeah.
And it all moves in coordination. If anybody has ever been to a port, or if you've not been to a port, go to a port, take a tour. I think they're available. I'm not sure.
They are,
Uh,
sure.
but it's like a dance. It's magical, right? It's sort of a trance, right? When you watch everything and all the containers coming off the vessel and then moving into certain places that make sense for them to go on the truck and the order that they do it in. And it's really magical. And so I highly recommend, especially if you offer port tours. I have no idea. Do you?
We do offer port tours. We're very involved in the communities,
Okay.
and with schools as well, because we want to educate, the future versions of us,
Hmm.
that these are possibilities. And so we're very big in just education and knowing who we are and why we're there.
Hmm.
And ultimately, it impacts and it helps your life. So,
I love that.
yeah, we're an economic engine. And as we're driving down, my husband will hear stories. I'm like, oh, look, the cranes are down. It's a ship is being worked on. And so things like that. He's just like, okay, put it away, Stephanie.
I did the same thing with a plane because we had this Russian plane at the Toronto airport and it's been sitting there for years. And I
Oh,
saw it for the first time and I was like, oh, there it is. I've heard about it in the news and all these things. So my husband was like, what? What is wrong with you? I'm like, this is what happens when you're a supply chain professional. You are very passionate about all things supply chain. So,
yeah.
as we look into the future, what do you think the biggest areas of opportunity are for the Port of New York and New Jersey, and maybe for the industry as a whole?
Yeah. So for us, we ask these questions often, and we actually ask ourselves, what does what do we want to be when we grow up,
Hmm.
in a way. So back in 2017, we actually commissioned a long-range port master plan, to help us identify those opportunities for the next 20, 30 years and really kind of give us a guideline of what we could do. Because like I said, we're land constrained, but we know that we're going to keep growing. And so in 2019, we published our port master plan. It's available on our website.
Hmm.
Um, And it actually showed that, well, funny enough, in 30 years, you're going to double or triple your volumes. And so, whew, when we saw that, we got excited, but yet we recognized, okay, so these are going to be some challenges. We're going to need to start really thinking about hard investments, collaborate with our stakeholders and ourselves. And we're going to need to be able to, use this flexible roadmap to really look at near long-term strategies on infrastructure. What does the environmental population changes look like? Technology, that's a huge one
Mm.
in our industry. So it really gave us a proactive approach to like get us started. And so that's what we're doing. We said, okay, here it is. And now we're in the phase one of all these, opportunities and items and milestones that we're trying to achieve. Yeah.
That sounds so exciting. Can you talk to us about some of those sort of major infrastructure projects that you're
Yeah.
focused on right now? Because I think with some of the challenges you mentioned, some of the opportunities, you're
Yeah.
working on some pretty exciting things. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you can share some of that with us, I would love that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, so we're in the phase one of our port master plan, like I mentioned, and one of the first things that we realized it's our roads. Okay. So if anyone's driven through New York and New Jersey, yeah. Um, sorry and welcome. Um, we know that there's a lot of work to be done. So roughly about like a little over a year ago, we kicked off this roadway project called the Port Street Corridor Improvement Project, which was focused on the northern part of the Port Newark Elizabeth Marine Terminal area. And this road has not been redone since, I don't know, like World War One or two, I think.
Wow.
And yeah, and when you think about it, trucks have changed, volumes have changed, weight has changed. It's been maintained, but it hasn't been reconfigured or redeveloped, right?
Mhm.
So we knew, okay, number one, we got 9,000 truck drivers coming a day. We got to figure something out. So
Mhm.
all our great engineers within the agency and also within the department, got together and say, okay, we need to get this project going for a safe, efficient configuration of our roadways, for our networks, for our trucks. And we brought in the truck drivers into the community discussions
Wow.
so that we understand, like, hey, this is going to impact you. So we're going to have these conversations now and before we shut down areas so that it causes some pain points, let's talk about it. So that's been underway. It's been going, pretty smoothly, no pun intended. And it is going. We're hoping to be done soon, and so is the trucking community. But it is supposed to help, even when it comes to turns, efficiency on just queuing. It's just great. Um, Another project I can think of is so our berth and wharfs are fundamental. And for those who don't know, when it comes to vessels, when they come on in and they dock, you need to have a berth and wharf. Otherwise, you're dead in the water. And
Pardon the
so
pun again. You are on
I know
fire with those.
it's a Jersey thing. And so we have $180 million going into our berth and wharf priority repair program. And it's just to make sure that they're stayed in good repair so we can continue operating.
Right.
Um, but one of the most proudest moments I think yeah, I would say it's one of our most proudest moments. It's our project engineering and design agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So we just signed this, we executed this. What this means, this agreement, is that we're going to be focusing on further deepening and widening the navigational channels by an
Mm.
additional 5 feet. And
Wow.
so that is fundamentally important to be competitive, to handle the ever-changing vessel sizes that are, coming through, the industry. And so it's not just going to impact our port, but it's also going to impact the whole region. And so because we are the first port of call for 75% of, our ocean carrier services, we took that into account that if we start now, these conversations and these agreements, that it will set us in a good stage for the future.
Hmm.
So
I
those are some
love
top
that.
three.
Well, and thank you for sharing all of that with us. One of the things
Yeah.
that stood out for me on that the project around the roads was that you brought in the trucking community and said, "Hey, what does this need
Yeah.
to look like for you to feel good about coming into our port and leaving our
Yeah.
ports?" But what that did was you gave them the heads up. There's going to be
Mm-hmm.
short-term pain for
Yeah.
long-term gain, and it's not just long-term gain that we think is right.
Yeah.
It's long-term gain that you have been a part of. And I think that's really important. And I wanted to note that because if we're innovating, right? We're bringing in technology or we're widening bursts or whatever that looks like, and we're making all these partnership deals. It's really important for those who it's going to affect to understand what it means for them.
Yeah.
Whether it's a technology implementation, whether it's
Right.
some road restructuring, some people don't, they think we'll just go and do it and we'll get it done and everything's going to be
Mhm.
fine. But really, at the end of the day, we need to bring in everybody. This takes collaboration, this takes all of us together, and we need to bring the different stakeholders to the table and let them know what's going on. It just makes better business, I think, for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. You have to have honest conversations. You will find times that you don't agree and you'll agree to disagree, but you'll find a solution together. That's
Yeah.
key. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So, what do you think that potential impact of those examples that you gave us, both at the port, but also, keeping goods moving, but also maybe for the wider industry as a whole? What do you think is the potential impact of all of that?
Yeah, so the impacts right now that we're seeing is we have to continue to be flexible. So like this industry is all about flexibility, adaptability, right? Because you just never know what's going to happen. And I mean, we've lived it the last couple years. We have so many, over a dozen examples. Um, and so we have to be open-minded and stay open-minded to evolve with the industry. And so when there's new emergent technologies or tools, it's common for folks to be scared at first, right? And so, but we just need to educate ourselves, work with other best practices. Other ports, other competitors are not just competitors, but they're also peers. And
Hmm.
so it's really important, to user relationships and just say, hey, how's it working out for you? I may not one size fit all, with them or for us, but it's something that we need to talk about. So being able to be adaptable to meet these future demands, because, I have this vision that, okay, here's 2050, we're triple the numbers from where we are today. We really can grow inland. What is it going to look like? So instead of freaking out, have these conversations and know that you're going to change and
Hmm.
it's okay. As long as you all are on the same, ship together, sailing through. So
There's another one,
I
everybody.
know.
There's another one.
But it's true, it's so important that when folks are so used to being in their way because it worked and it probably does, and there's some great lessons from it, just bringing in what does work and just tweaking it to meet the future version of us is key. So remaining adaptable, remaining flexible, and remaining educated. Those
So,
are three things.
yeah, let's talk about that future because I think that you have new marine terminal operator leases with Port Liberty, New York, and Bayonne. I hope that I'm getting that right.
There you go.
And
Yeah.
and APM terminals too. And they also seem to be focused on planning for the future. So,
Yeah.
how are you approaching some of these conversations and the discussions that you're having as you think about how you need to approach the next several decades?
Yeah, so I love this because of a couple of reasons. I've been very blessed to be at the negotiating tables for these leases and seeing these transformation, from a traditional landlord tenant model to
Mhm.
really memorializing our partnership. So what that means is these leases now have these near-term capacity, investments that our port master plan had indicated were needed to make sure that we can meet, the capacity that is coming towards us. remaining fluid and making sure we're hitting those velocity numbers that we want to see. So when it comes to using space, we're having these conversations, and we actually kicked off some really good conversations already with our stakeholders. So we have working group sessions where they're super focused on like near term, what they're doing within their footprint, because everything they do within their leasehold, in their yard, et cetera, has a domino effect outside, which is our area, right? And so
Hmm.
we need to be in lockstep to work together. So we have to support all these construction and investments, so that it can be fluid with each other. Another area that we have in these leases now is these things called master terminal developmental plans.
Hmm.
So it's like a master plan within the lease. And so while they're investing now, it also says, hey, in the future, more eloquently, of course, and more legalized, but it says in the future, when you hit a certain trigger, um, what is that trigger one for you, APM or Port Liberty Bayonne in New York? And what set of investments are you going to be needed to put in? And so we then have these communications, and it's a true partnership to understand what they're going to be needed. And so for me, funny story, because I was at those negotiation tables, I looked around the room on both sides. There were like three or four of us, me included, and they were saying, "Well, do you think that the folks in 20 years will understand what we meant by this language?" And I said, "Excuse me, I'm one of those folks." And so, so
I'm not going
selfishly,
anywhere.
and we make it a little more like English. And so we have a funny like joke. I'm like, yeah, in 20 years, I will make sure to see this transformation, but I'll also give you a call and have some coffee, and we'll remember these days. But these leases are now able to, have that spirit
Mhm.
that traditional leases will say, must do this in compliance with this. It's more like, must collaborate with these plans and discuss opportunities. And you could feel and read through the words the collaboration that is made. So that's what I mean by transformative.
So you
And
need
I have
to
a coffee day in 20 years.
you need to pre-schedule an email to yourself 20 years from now. I mean, I'm just
No,
saying.
so we have a coffee day already, the four of us, the ones and we said we're gonna be here, and I said, okay, coffee in 20 years we're meeting out in the field to discuss this. And so it's exciting. Yeah.
Now, let's talk about the success of your Council on Port Performance, which I think you abbreviate to CPP,
Yeah.
because it really shows the Port of New York and New Jersey's commitment to industry collaboration. I mean, you just gave us an amazing example of that. But why do you think that collaboration is so important as you prepare for that future? Do you have any advice for other organizations looking to improve their collaborative efforts? Because I think like it almost feels like it's coming natural to you. And I've heard
Yeah.
of a lot of different stories for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey with similar stories, similar ways that they engage with their people and the people that work for them and their community. And it seems to, I'm getting the same vibe from you as well. So give us some of this advice because I want to know what some of the secret sauce is.
Yeah. So, my advice is the following. Your stakeholders, your partners are experts in what they do. You are not, right? And so that automatically requires some level of respect. And
Mhm.
so when they're at the table and they're giving you some honest feedback, listen, right? You don't have to agree, but you have to listen and understand where they're coming from. And then share reciprocal, feedback, and then try to understand. It sounds very simple, but it really is important to just have that level of respect. Bringing them in the beginning, way ahead, not reactively, but proactively.
Mhm.
And having those honest conversations, mapping things out, knowing like, hey, like for example, our port master plan, it took 2 years because we also reached out to stakeholders that are going to be part of these impacts and changes, right? So
Mhm.
when it came to the warehousing community that's outside of our area, within 50 miles, we have 1 billion square feet of warehouse and distribution space.
Wow.
We had to reach out to those associations and say, hey, in 2050, we're going to double or triple. What does that look like for you? Right? And so having those honest and raw conversations,
Mm.
it takes time. Don't get me wrong. It takes time. It takes effort. You know, you got to have thick skin.
Uh-huh.
Um, but but there's a level of respect and trust that's going to be built out of those
Mhm.
conversations. And then what we do here in CPP is when we have an issue that none of us can solve, we said, okay, we're gonna create a working group that is solely focused in finding recommendations for that item. So, like, for example, we have the empty container return working group, where there was an influx of, needs or a surge of empty containers and where to go. So we just, since we had a member of every stakeholder in the supply chain on the table already, they designated folks. We created a smaller working group, and then they went to work.
Mm.
When we came up with recommendations, they bring it back to the main CPP group. Same thing with workforce development. That was a true success out of the CPP group where they said, hey, we're seeing a decline in this. And so again, stakeholders got together, small little committee, put some recommendations, and then we took that within, the
Mm.
Port Authority and said, hey, this is what our stakeholders are saying. What can we do? And that actually birthed some new ideas. And we
Mm.
also now have like a force development center in the local community that helps and works with associations in the shipping and maritime that helps educate folks who are coming into the workforce of what can you do at the port.
Mm.
It's not just being a pilot,
Right.
or being a longshoreman, which are very hardworking jobs, but there's so much opportunities.
So many
And
more.
so, yes, it's education. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I wanted to say, I wanted to point out what you were saying about warehousing. You going to those stakeholders and being like, this is what growth looks like for us. I know from being in warehousing that some of those contracts are very lengthy and you have to sign for like a 5, maybe a 10-year contract
Wait.
to have that building. And most of the time when you're signing for it, you might have the business in that moment, but you don't know what the 5 to 10 years would look like. And so understanding from you what growth looked like for you and understanding the opportunity that they can have out of that and knowing that they could have some sort of potential security out of that by signing these agreements actually makes it so much better for the community at large because you've got the landlord that owns the business potentially, or the building, and then you've got the business that's signing those long-term contracts. And so that domino effect is what I wanted to point out because I think it's so, so important. Now, sustainability is another focus for the industry, and I think it's also one for the Port of New York and New Jersey. What kind of progress are you seeing, and what are some of the key initiatives that you can share with us?
Yeah, so we take sustainability very seriously at the Port Authority. Not to toot our own horn, but we were the first public transportation agency in the nation to embrace the Accord in 2018. So we, as a Port Authority, we actually have a net zero roadmap to meet those zero carbon emissions by 2050. And so what we did was we took those goals and we translated those into our leases with our MTOs. So APM, Port Liberty, Bayonne, and Port Liberty, New York have those requirements as well. And we're saying, hey, we need to come together for these collaborative initiatives surrounding sustainability. Everyone has their own project as long as we meet these emissions. And so there's like these interim goals as well that
Hmm.
even ourselves we're looking to do on
Hmm.
on our properties. One of the things that we actually have and we've been going on for some time now is the truck replacement program, which provides, funding for qualified drayage truckers,
Okay.
to purchase new and more efficient vehicles because as I mentioned, we have 9,000 daily callers. And so you
Right.
can imagine, that's very big key. And it's actually a very good program that folks have taken advantage of and we're grateful for. Another one we have is called the Clean Vessels Initiative. So essentially, what it is that we have a little over a dozen. ocean carriers that signed up for it. And when you're on approach to the port around like 20 nautical miles or so, you start to reduce speed and just slow things through, right?
Huh.
And so you're slowing down, you're reducing your CO2 emissions, and by default you're reducing air pollutants. So that's also helping, our sustainability goals, and we're always looking to engage more active ocean carriers on this. And we're actively looking and partnering up with stakeholders when it comes to their initiatives. We have a Port Authority Office of Sustainability department that works with us, and our stakeholders because they're our subject matter experts, to come up with ways that's best practices globally that could be possibly looked at as a pilot program at our ports. So these are other things that we're looking at to constantly, invest and innovate as well.
Yeah, and they kind of seem like almost simple things in some ways, but they take a lot
Mhm.
of work and they take
Yeah,
a lot of time, energy, resources, and money, but it also takes collaboration, bringing everybody together to help with the funding, right? So that one stakeholder is not necessarily responsible for all of that because they can't be. And
right.
so I think your initiatives really show that. I can't believe we're at the end of this conversation. I think you and I could go on for several hours, but
Yeah.
I do have to ask you one last question. Um,
Okay.
so given the current dynamic geopolitical environment that we've talked about, how do you see the rest of 2025 playing out at the port of New York and New Jersey? I mean, get out your crystal ball, and I'm going to hold you to it in January 2026.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna say, for us, it's it's looking pretty strong for 2025. I know there's a contest going on for 2024 number, so I won't say a number.
Yeah, please
But
don't.
but I think we're gonna do really great and surpass our 2024. Our advantage is that we have a diverse portfolio of trading partners, and we're constantly growing new global partnerships to stay competitive. So, we're really about being resilient, making things happen, as you heard, all the things that were underway. And so I'm very, very, humbled about the hardworking people that are out there that are constantly doing what they do in order for us to stay competitive and ahead. So my answer to your question is we're going to be strong. We're going to be competitive. I mean, it's New York and New Jersey. How can we not be?
I love it. And that's a good place to end on. I mean, the current geopolitical landscape remains a challenge, but you don't have to stand still with the Port of New York and New Jersey. Their network of terminals, railroads, roads, warehouses, and distribution centers keeps the world's trade industry moving. So, did you have a guess at today's big question? Well, at the top of the show, now's the time we're going to tell them, Stephanie. At the top of the show, I asked you how many TEUs did the Port of New York and New Jersey handle in 2024? Well, it was a massive 8.7 million, an 11% jump over 2023's total. And they're not done yet because they're going to do even more in 2025. If you want to find out more, you can check them out at PANYJ.gov/port. And a massive thanks to Stephanie for joining me today and the team at the Port of New York and New Jersey for making this episode happen. If you would like to hear more, we have plenty more podcasts for you featuring the best and the brightest in the industry. So head over to letstalksupplychain.com to check out the latest. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for having me here.